Hey, speaking of people who were, at least for a time, morally lucky, you ever heard of this guy called Joe Rogan? Whatever happened to Joe Rogan's other background, by the way? Didn't he have like a red... What, didn't he change it? It used to look like this, and then it was red for a bit on the inside. Did he switch back because everyone hated it? Because I hated it. I didn't like it. He moved? Yeah, but did he move back? He moved to Texas because he's a dipshit? Okay, so he moved back then, I take it.
Well, you know, there's people that voted for Biden.
Oh, he does DMCA now, doesn't he? Sorry, guys, but you already know what Joe Rogan looks like. We're just going to have to contend with the audio. Yeah, he does do that now. It's one of the reasons we stopped going over Joe Rogan stuff. He got aggressive with it, too.
That are doing it now.
Yeah.
They're like, what did I do?
Right.
Like, what did I choose? Like, how is this guy?
Yeah, you just can't listen to an interview or he's saying some of the stuff he says that just makes no sense at all. It's like you can't listen to those interviews and feel like you made a good decision.
They're referring to Joe Biden.
I don't know how you
Did you hear what he said like yesterday or a couple days ago?
Mm-mm.
He was talking about the Revolutionary War. He's like, one of the reasons why we lost the Revolutionary War, one of the problems with the Revolutionary War was they didn't have enough airports.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I saw that. Like, what the hell?
Like, pull him.
It's crazy.
If you had any other job and you were talking like that,
yeah,
they would go, hey, you're done.
A few moments later.
The same.
Okay, I'm going to skip some bit here to reduce the likelihood of me getting DMCA'd. Jamie pulls up the clip, and Joe Biden did say that, kind of, but he was referring to something that Trump said. So Joe Biden was making fun of Trump for saying that. Here's the clip of Donald Trump saying that, as soon as Twitter loads the video. Love doing this audio-only stuff, you know. Audio-visual medium, who cares, right? DMCA, you know, even though we're doing transformative analysis, nobody would watch this segment I'm doing as a substitute. Like, it's not a commercial substitute for the initial podcast episode of Joe Rogan. So, you know, this would win in any court of law, but because YouTube always assumes the claimant is the one who's in the right, and Twitter video is not loading, so that's its own kerfuffle. That's great. I'm gonna keep refreshing.
People that voted for Biden.
Okay, go.
The Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York, and named after the great George Washington, Commander-in-Chief.
I'm in a state.
The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory across the waters of the Delaware, and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our army manned the airport. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's great.
So he fucked up.
Yeah, he did. But I feel
So
like you can tell too. It sounds like a little different. He's like, you can tell he like messed up his words, but yeah.
He just misspoke.
Well, that's the
But
thing about media these days. It's like,
right.
You
never
got to
know.
look into it.
Yeah, that's the thing about media. You know, you have to engage. He just misspoke. You know, it was a funny goof. Yeah, dude. Do you guys remember when Joe Rogan was just an idiot and not also a partisan hack? I mean, he endorsed Bernie, for Christ's sake. But now, because of what I guess COVID, you know, because the COVID conspiracy dollar was huge. It made Jimmy Dore's channel. You know, it made it massive. So he piled into that, and after that, you can't be like, you have to be a Trumper, basically, in his own like idiotic, removed from reality kind of way. It's insane too, because like, you know, I don't think Joe Rogan is a fascist. I just think he's a stupid meathead. Being a meathead does incline, well, being stupid too. Being stupid and a meathead both incline people, I think, towards conservatism. You know, unwillingness to engage in critical thought. Being dumb just generally tends to make you more conservative. Not an insult on my part, by the way. Statistically backed. That's truth. You know, there's a lot of, yeah, he's also an insanely wealthy white man. An older, wealthy white man. So yeah, not exactly surprising that he would that he would lean in that direction. But the hackery, you know? Can somebody tell me who the guy he's talking to is? Does somebody know? I want to know. I don't trust any motherfucker who looks like this, by the way. Bo something? Ah, Bo Burnham. Yes, this is Bo Burnham. Welcome to the internet. It's that guy. Nobody in chat seems to know. It's not Bo Burnham, just in case anyone takes me seriously. Bo Nickel, a chud MMA fighter. MMA fighters, such a blighted sport when it comes to political affiliation. Do you guys remember when Joe Rogan would have actual experts on and would listen to them? And now it's like, again, I don't watch his show, so when I see stuff, it's been pre-selected for me. But I remember there used to be a lot more intellectual curiosity. At least it looked like it. Is that an NFT profile pic on this guy? Is this NFT? I don't even know if it is. It looks like an NFT. It's artistically void. It has to be. It looks like one. He doesn't even have the hexagram. Or hexagon. Not a hexagon, though. It doesn't have to be. Oh, yeah, this is like his brand thing? What are we doing, man? You got like a cartoon thing going on. Whatever. I mean, make the world more interesting, I guess. Look, I'm not saying you have to be gay to do this shit. I'm just saying that the fans of this sport who pretend they don't see anything gay in it need to get over themselves. You know? Like, I'm just saying, like, MMA has had a long relationship with authoritarian governments, UAE, Chechnya, and conservative politics. I mean, it makes sense. It fits in with, like, the, you know, the hyper masculine, like, you know, we used to be real men kind of bullshit. Not a huge surprise there. Anyway, just the blatant partisan, holy shit, this dude's younger than me. He's 2 years younger than me. My God. The blatant partisan hackery here with, like, the, you know, if anyone misspoke like that in any other job, they would be out of job. And then when Trump said it's like, well, he misspoke or whatever. When did Joe Rogan get like that, man? Like, seriously, at what point in time? Because he's always done this, like, esoteric pseudo-libertarian bit. But now, I don't know. I think it's like, this is like, again, a very Marxist take. But libertarianism, as the idea of a person being like a kind of innately anti-institutionalist, critical of government, free thinker, you know, with all the connotations that has, but not being a socialist. It's like something in a superposition, you know? There are too many internal antagonisms. Eventually, the superposition will collapse, and you'll have one of two potential outcomes. Either a fascist or you know, like, sort of esoteric conspiracy theorist that can sort of trend in a bunch of different directions, but that isn't necessarily, like, politically oriented, right? It goes in either of those directions. I guess you could become like a real libertarian, a socialist, but that doesn't seem to happen that often from a right libertarian perspective. I wish it would happen more often. That'd be nice. You know, when I went to the Libertarian Convention back in 2020, when I bought my nice shoes, when I went over, one of the reasons I went over is because I was talking with, you know, some of the organizers for the event. The American Libertarian Party has mostly been taken over by, fascists, like the Mises group, caucus. Yeah. And they are, like, very much, they do the Milei thing where it's like, we're in favor of free economics, and also we're anti-woke, and also we're going to use the police state to shut down any opposition, so we're not actually anti-government. They do that bit. And all of the authentic libertarians have been kind of like bleeding out of the Libertarian Party, just, you know, either into the far right, which is their goal, or just into whatever else, you know? Libertarianism has always been an inroad for that kind of thing. That guy you debated, yeah? Yeah, remember when I debated the guy from the Mises Caucus, and the first question I asked him was on revoking the Civil Rights Act, and he tried to worm around it for a bit before saying, yeah, I would. And it all went downhill from there. Does right libertarianism even exist outside American politics? What's happening in Argentina? It is largely a consequence of American brain damage. It's an American movement that has spread around the world. Though, yeah, it's mostly an American thing and to some extent a Latin American thing. And the main reason it's a Latin American thing is because we kept killing their socialist leaders. So we would replace them with people who would, liberalize their economy in response to a threat of nationalization. And as always, they always ended up being authoritarians every fucking time. So we did this all over the place. Milei is an American offspring intellectually. He literally cites American economists, constantly. I will always remember Pinochet. Have you read about how Milei has legalized people to be paid in non-monetary things like meat and milk? No, I hadn't read that specifically. It's not surprising to me. That seems in line. But I hadn't read that specifically. Returning to a tradition where you would work as like a cobbler's apprentice and you would be paid in like lodgings and bread every day, except now you don't even get the lodging. You still have to pay rent in bread. You should check out the book A Libertarian Walks Into a Bear, How a Town Tries to Go Libertarian and Became Overrun by Bears Because No One Wanted to Run the Infrastructure. I think I've actually heard about that, though I haven't read the book. Yeah, libertarianism can't exist in reality. It's literally like a non-functioning ideology. Libertarianism, and by libertarianism, I mean right libertarianism. Right libertarianism is a political impossibility. Unlike other ideologies, like fascism, theocratic governance, ultranationalism, other bad ideologies, those can exist. Those are possible. Libertarianism isn't, which is why, given enough time, its proponents always collapse into either irrelevance or just being a fascist, which is it's the most adjacent position politically. It's not even a matter of libertarians being unprincipled. It's just that their ideology can't actually be put into practice. It's not possible. Property rights require the existence of a state, and inequality in economic outcomes will produce agitation that will either lead to an ousting of the powerful through democratic processes or through violent means, or an authoritarian crackdown. It is not possible to resolve this without moving over. Most popular podcast in the world, by the way. What are you talking about? Property rights were central to feudalism? Yeah, and they were backed. I mean, they didn't have the modern concept of a nation state at the time, sure, but either through like mercantile corporations or by the royalty, the king, whatever. Like, fundamentally, the idea of like statehood in the modern conception didn't exist with its borders and its very specific nationalist designations, but certainly, the underlying guarantors of property rights did. Yeah, property rights were very different under feudalism, for sure. Feudalism was weird. When we talk about history, we tend to project our understanding of the economy today onto how things worked back then. But a lot of stuff back then didn't work anything like how we think it did. The way their labor, the way the economy worked. A lot of people think is like, oh, a serf is when your job is to be a farmer. And buying property is just, you have money and you buy the property. Like they don't understand how all this stuff was tied up into feudalism and mercantile corporations back then. Totally different systems. Like, reading on them is really, really fascinating. It was a completely different way of, like, the concept of like wage labor wasn't even really a thing back then. It wasn't. In some ways, you had a lot less freedom than you might think, and you probably already thought you didn't have much freedom, so you have less than that. A serf is basically a farmer who comes free with the property. Yeah, you can't quit, that's for sure. Like, okay, if you ever want to learn how different they were, look at the treatment of the merchant class during the feudal period. Big generalization, but do a little research onto it. Very, very interesting, okay? Because you had lots of examples of people being really wealthy because they were really effective like merchants and they traded a lot, and it didn't mean shit because the real power wasn't money. The real power was the aristocracy, the king, the queen, the nobleman, that whole thing. Sometimes merchants would have their shit repossessed or they would just be killed. They could have all the money in the world, but they wouldn't be able to buy property in a town because if that town's lord didn't like that merchant, like, who would give them that? You know what I mean? Money couldn't buy everything back then. This is a capitalism thing. This is like a modern economic thing. But like, you can imagine it kind of, I guess, to like having a ton of money in like North Korea to an extent, where it's like you can have a bunch of money in theory, but there's a set of like military and political connections that you would need to run through no matter what, that money can't circumvent. Whereas in the United States, if you have money, you're God. There's essentially nothing you can't do with money as long as you follow the law. And the conception of laws, again, back then, very different to what we have today. Nowadays, we have laws for like everything. Back then, the law was like an abstract translation and individual interpretation of a set of guiding policies that judges would just kind of riff off of, you know? Yeah, like, yeah, a lot of it was just whatever the Lord or the Knight wanted. But if it went to a judge or a magistrate or whatever, you know, to like do an arbitration or manage a property dispute, it was like, you couldn't like play lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't be like, well, technically, legally, I'm allowed to do that because of this thing. If you tried that shit with the king, they'd just kill you. You know, like, yeah, look up fugitive peasants. Simply leaving your home without permission was a crime. Serfs were just slaves. Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. No matter how wealthy you were, a merchant without any other. This is one of the reasons why. Political marriages were so common back then, because you could have all the money in the world, but it wouldn't protect you from being killed unless you were like, I don't know, the stepfather of a noble woman, and then it's like, oh, we can't kill him, he's royalty. Like, it's not really, like, it's more complicated than that, but the connections mattered a lot more than the money in a lot of cases. And also, you could have all the money in the world, but what happens if some dude shoots you with a crossbow and then takes your shit, you know? Like, there's no like state apparatus to guarantee your wealth in the event it gets taken. Like, there's no, if shit gets taken from you, you know, you don't, the government can't, like that wealth belongs to them now. In the modern day, even if like thieves steal your money or whatever and get away with it, that money is stolen money and it is like illegal for them to use. And if the state ever catches up to them, that will, like, that's a thing. But back then, you just take the gold. It's your gold. It's just yours now, you know? The Holy Roman Empire law was a feudal system in which you were allowed to retaliate against the other party. Retribute? What word are you trying to spell there? Retribute. Does historical oppression of the merchant class coincide? Please, chat. Spelling. Correspond with the pedicuring of Jews? Persecuting? Please, 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 please. I misspeak enough on my own. Chad doesn't know when it's you misspeaking versus me. They'll assume I'm the retard. You have to let them know you're the retard too. Please. Ameliorate. Yes, a lot of the persecution of Jews in Europe was related to the fact that being part of the merchant class didn't afford you the same kind of protection that it does today. But it's complicated. It's tied to the Roman conception of moral value in different types of work. Well, yeah, for most of history, the idea of just making money on its own was very, well, I think this is a Christian thing largely, but the idea of just making money was like, looked down upon. You know, it's why usury was forbidden and why bankers were held in contempt. The idea of like, oh, wow, you just make money? Well, the Bible says that it's easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle than for a wealthy man to pass into heaven. So, you know, there you go, right? 99% sure this is just Protestantism? No, you have it the opposite. Protestants are the opposite. Protestants are the prosperity gospel people. Protestants are the ones who are like, actually making lots of money means that God has favored you in your mortal life, you know? Catholics are the ones who more traditionally are on the side of like, you know, you should be a humble serf and you should like have the Bible read to you in Latin. Protestantism is kind of like the moral center of modern capitalism, at least in the West. Obviously, it shifts around. No American prots are like that. Sorry. Protestantism is now an American phenomena. I don't care what you say. I know it didn't start here, blah, blah, blah. It's like how English is an American language now. I don't care where it originated from. The most powerful Protestants in the world by far are Americans. American Protestant evangelicals are ludicrously influential compared to anything Protestantism has to offer in Europe, you know?